Hello, Devlin here with you, and welcome to another edition of my pirate radio show. And this just isn't any edition. This is actually a special issue. This is my Batman versus Superman specialty show. Everything today is about Superman and Batman. The new movie is now in theaters. Maybe you've seen it already. At this point, as I'm recording the show, I have not seen it. But by the time this airs, I will have seen it. And I'm going to do the first two segments right now. And then I'm going, just a few hours from now, I'm actually going to go to the theaters and see it. And I will give a full review in my last segment and see what I think of the DC universe that's panning out. I'm a huge fan of Batman and Superman. And of course, this is legendary. For a DC fan, which I am. I'm more DC than Marvel. Although the Marvel movies have certainly made me a Marvel fan as well. But I grew up with DC, and so I wanted to do this. I love Superman and Batman, and like everybody else too, Aquaman, Wonder Woman. But of course, these are the two biggest. And the fact that in a few hours I'm going to see them sharing a screen for the first time, this is huge. You throw in all those other ones that are going to make guest appearances. I can't wait. I will try to make it a spoiler-free review because I'm not a big fan of spoilers. The first segment, we're going to give over to Superman. I am a huge Superman fan. Ironically, when I was growing up, I was actually a bigger Batman fan. I just absolutely love The Dark Knight and all his travails, whether we're talking the early days of the 66 Adam West, or to the Tim Burton, to the recent, Chris Nolan movies. But as I started watching Smallville, I suddenly became realization that I am a Superman fan. I relate to him more. I really wish I could relate to Batman, but Batman was edgy and moody and vigilante type. But Superman kind of has my tone more. I also kind of reflect with Superman more because I realize that we now live in with a young generation that looks down on Superman because he's too powerful or he's just too... And I think in some ways there's an irony about that. Just because, I don't want to get too deep in my Superman feelings, but, Superman just doesn't get the love that he should deserve. Because he really was the first superhero to be brought to life in comics. And then he parlayed into, movies, TV, all the stuff that we know and love. And, it was through Smallville that basically made me realize that I'm more Superman. I try to follow the rules as best as possible. I try to be a good person, and I feel alienated from the world. So technically, everything about Superman fits me more than dark, brooding, vigilante type. Although I may have some of the dark side of Batman in me too, but that doesn't mean Superman doesn't have his own dark side. My first introduction to Superman was probably through the 70s and 80s through the Super Friends show. Still to this day, although Super Friends, is looked down upon, I actually love watching old Super Friends cartoons, and the voice of Superman in those cartoons, to me, were absolutely, just magical. I can picture it when I close my eyes. He's the voice I hear. I wish I knew the name of the person who did it, but it's a very famous voice actor, but it fails me right now. And I just that strong, I can't do it. I can't even do it. But anyhow, I loved seeing him in the Justice League with Batman and that. Super Friends is a very light show, but you could always count on Superman. And then, when I was in 1978, it was a snowy night, I remember, and my dad took me to see Superman the movie. I was so excited. Now, you got to remember, back in 1978, there wasn't many superheroes that hit the big screen, a couple of them hit the big screen back in the 30s and the 40s, in movie serials. And, you know, Batman did have technically the Adam West version, had a movie that hit the big screens. But in all intents and purposes, Superman was the first big, epic superhero movie. And I was looking forward to seeing it. I remember how giddy I was. And I absolutely loved it. I remember still being a kid. I still remember it was snowing that day. And how thrilled I was coming out of the theater and realizing Superman had come to life. And Christopher Reeves will always be my Superman, even though I've loved other carnations, Henry Cavill, George Reeves, even Brandon Routh, who I was a big fan of that movie. But seeing him fly on the big screen for the first time, I know there's cynical younger people that are going to say, but that movie's so boring. But it isn't. I was engrossed by it, and seeing him fly, you know, may not technically look as wonderful as they can do now, but it was just magical. And he was everything. And, you know, Christopher Reeves became one of my big heroes as a kid. And then came Superman 2, which was even better than the first one. It had a lot of fight sequences, character development, and just a big epic battle that, you know, was way better than the first. Although I put the first one still in a special place. The third one, not so great. It has its moments, Richard Pryor in there, but the battle between Clark Kent and Superman is pretty awesome. The fourth one I never even watched. In fact, a lot of people have told me, don't. It's probably something I'll buy one day cheap. That was the Quest for Peace, but I've heard it's absolutely miserable. Before I get into other incarnations of Superman, Christopher Reeves, as I said, was my hero, and I remember being heartbroken when I heard that he fell off the horse and paralyzed himself. I remember I had the opportunity, I had my brother, I believe, won tickets to go see Christopher Reeve. He was going to be inspirational speaking at Cops Coliseum, and I took my friend Reese with me to see him. And it was a fun night. I'd like to say it was more inspirational than it was, but it was actually more surreal, almost David Lynch-like. Me and Reese were just waiting, and they had some stand-up comics up first, and then basically they kind of just had this big platform and the curtains open, and Christopher Reeves just drove out. You know, it's Cops Coliseum. We didn't have great seats, so we're watching them on the monitors, and they actually had a translator, like typing out what he was saying because Christopher Reeves, you know, his speech was affected. And what made it worse was that the interpreter screwed up so many times, it just didn't even make sense. So we're expecting this big inspirational moment. And don't get me wrong, it still was. It's a moment I still share with Reese. And just to see him was just phenomenal, and to be in the same presence of him. But then he'd talk, and then basically they literally like backed him up. Like he just drove backwards. He didn't turn around or anything, and then the curtains closed, and then they were going to have more stand-up comics because people had paid all this money, and he basically may have been out there for maybe about 40 minutes. And half the time you couldn't hear him, and half the time the interpreter was screwing up what he was saying. It was a mess of a show, but still kind of magical. And of course, when he passed, he'll always be my Superman. Sorry, getting a little thing. Then other carnations happened, and carnations, flowers. It's spring. I've got flowers on the brain. But anyhow, I started catching other things like The Adventures of Superman with George Reeves, the old black and white show I'd watch, and I liked it. Not as campy as Batman, but still good for a good camp. I've got a season or two on DVD, and I like to break them out once in a while. One thing I really loved was the old Max Fleischer cartoons. These are wonderful. I think there's about, I want to say maybe 12. There might be a little more. But if you get a chance to see them, and I believe they're all on YouTube, they're just phenomenal. These were made, I want to say, in the 40s, 50s, and they're just incredible. Maybe even earlier than that. But the color, the look of them, it's so iconic. It's wonderful to see. I did watch a couple of the movie serials, but they weren't as good as the fun George Reeves version that came out. And it is strange that two people named Reeves played Superman. Then I started watching Smallville, and again, another wonderful show, and basically became the template for shows like The Flash and The Arrow and Supergirl. And they did such a great job with it. I think the show went on a little longer than it should have. Tom Welling was really great in the role. He just personified Superboy, and he just fit so well. He's a beautiful, beautiful man, and he just looks so good. And a little bit of a spoiler if you're still looking to binge watch it, but they always said that you would never see him in the suit, and you don't really in the whole course of it, but you do see him basically doing everything. And I find it weird that the show went on so long that you'd meet up with other superheroes, and it was always weird to me that, like, Green Arrow and The Flash and Aquaman were all, like, people already, like, saving people and stuff, and Superman still wasn't made, even though there was so much allusion to it. I think they should have either cut the show a little sooner, or they should have broke their word and we got to see him as Superman. I never really got into, like, Lois and Clark, though I know it does have its legion of fans. And then they released the Brandon Routh version that was done by Bryan Singer, who actually left the X-File franchise. Luckily, Bryan Singer has made some really great choices in the X-Men, returning to the X-Men thing, because he made a lot of enemies by, one, giving us what some people call a mediocre Superman movie, and because he left, the third X-Men is considered to be very weak too. And coming off a strong one like X-Men 2. Now, I actually like Superman Returns. I was nervous because when I first saw the trailers, I had heard that Bryan Singer was basically going to go back and follow up the second Superman that was in the series, and forget about 3 and 4, which easy to do. And then he was literally going to try to cast someone like Christopher Reeves and keep the story going from that aspect. And I thought that was pretty bold. And I think he succeeded. But when I first saw the trailers, I cringed. I thought Brandon Routh was going to be an absolute mess trying to recapture Christopher Reeves. And I was so delightful. And I actually literally remember going into the movie, almost my arms crossed, like, this is going to suck. But when I remember seeing it, I remember thinking, okay, Brandon Routh's not that bad. And I felt like the Grinch, because I went in there really not wanting to like this movie. And I remember my heart practically melting when you first see Superman. He stops a plane crash, and then he lands the plane in a baseball stadium, and the people all cheer. But at this point is when they really utilized the John Williams score, that just an iconic superhero theme. And basically, I remember my heart just kind of starting to melt. And my desire to hate this film was gone because I felt the magic of when I was a kid, when I saw 1 and 2 in the theaters, and just seeing Superman back, and the music, and just the feel of the early movies, and I felt it, and at that point I started enjoying myself. I liked Kevin Spacey's performance. I liked that, they had a triangle with Lois Lane and a character played by James Marsden. And what I liked about it was that they didn't make this guy a jerk, which I absolutely can't stand when they make a person a jerk just so we're voting for one. He was actually a really nice guy, and you could understand why Clark Kent was torn with, wanting Lois back and leaving her with this really nice guy. And I looked forward for more. And it actually made fairly good money, but fans just hated it and said all Superman does is lift things in this. And they might have been right. There wasn't a lot of action. The only problem is when you have Lex Luthor, although he's Superman's main nemesis, a big problem is that he's a mastermind. He's not physically. So you can't have Superman punch him unless there's a reason why, because he'd pretty much kill him and stuff. Now, or Lex Luthor's walking around with kryptonite, and brings him down to his knees, which is an easy way to do it. Little interesting tidbit about kryptonite. In all the incarnations, and I hope this is a true fact, because if not, I'm just spewing facts that aren't true. Kryptonite was actually originated in the superheroes radio show. Because the guy who played Superman and Clark Kent had so much dialogue, they needed something so he could actually have a break and have a sip of water and stuff. So they actually came up with kryptonite that eventually would go on to be in the comics and all the TV incarnations and movies. And, but yeah, it actually started in the radio show. Well, up next in the series is, Zack Snyder, or whatever his name is, decided he was going to bring the Man of Steel alive, but not only just to bring Superman back, but this would be DC's launch for their cinematic universe. Marvel had scored with Thor and Iron Man and Captain America and everything else, that DC desperately had to rush to it, which is ironic since DC kind of beat them to it with originally to hit theaters when Superman and Batman hit the theaters way before like a Spider-Man or X-Men hit. It looked like forever, and then finally when X-Men started putting things up there, Marvel finally was scoring, and now it was time for DC to build a cinematic universe. Man of Steel came out. I instantly loved Henry Cavill as the choice. I thought he looked like Superman. He was a wonderful choice. Looks great in the suit. When I saw Man of Steel, I found it really lackluster. I remember I didn't know anything about Iron Man going in, and I thought, they want Iron Man to start off the universe, and they were so successful with it that I thought, okay, well, they should have no problem. They're using Superman to kick off the DC. But I thought, there's so much in it that I really liked. But I thought Zack Snyder, who can be hit and miss with storytelling, visually he's spot on. I just thought Man of Steel, the story points, some of them were so horrible. I don't mind going back in flashbacks, but flashbacks seem to be coming up in the most unimportant times, slowing the pace of the movie. As I said, Henry Cavill was fine. I thought the cast was fine. Actually, I'm a huge Amy Adams fan, and I found her to be so annoying in this. Not her personally, the writing of Lois Lane, because Lois manages to be wherever you need her to be. Even when you're talking about, like, Superman who can fly all over the thing, and in mere minutes she can drive over someplace and be right there. There were so many inconsistencies with the story, and a little bit of a spoiler if you haven't seen Man of Steel. I really hated that Lois Lane basically finds out who Superman is within, an hour into the movie. I really thought that was horrible. So I've rewatched Man of Steel a couple of times. I've softened on it a bit, but I can't overlook some of its big problems. And I know the biggest problem that a lot of people had with it was not the problem I did. And again, a spoiler, so you might want to turn off here if you haven't seen it yet. But if you haven't seen it yet, you probably aren't going to. Is when Superman actually has to decide to kill someone. I thought it was well written. It was in the story context. I thought it was a bold move, but I know a lot of true Superman fans were like, oh no, Superman doesn't kill like that. But I thought in the context of the story it worked. I think they didn't do it willy-nilly. It was used better than me using the words willy-nilly. And so Superman got to come to life again, and I hated that. I'm so excited about this DC universe that they started with what I consider a little bit of a miss. But that doesn't stop me from getting ready and excited to see what they do with Batman now, and hopefully maybe they can improve upon Man of Steel, which, since Man of Steel isn't in my loved movies, it's just only a sort of like that. I can't wait to see. Like, that's a good post to go up. If they get lower than Man of Steel, I'll be worried. But you're still going to have to wait, because that's not coming till the end. And I don't know, because I have not seen it yet. But I am done talking about Superman. My 20 minutes are up. And I'm going to have a segment next on Batman, a character I equally love, who has had many incarnations that I absolutely adore. And then later on today, even I'm excited about the last segment, because I don't know if I'm going to come home. I'm going to do the interview a couple of hours after I've seen it, so it's fresh in my head. It's going to be a full 20-minute segment. I'm going to try to keep spoilers out, so anybody who hasn't seen it yet can enjoy it. Anyhow, going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with a look at the Dark Knight himself, Batman. I'm back, and I'm getting very excited about seeing Batman versus Superman. I'm so excited I can't talk. I am just a few short hours of seeing it, and then, as I said, very shortly after, I'm coming back here and doing my podcast for it. But I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket, because, I like to go in with a level head. I don't want to overhype it. I don't want to underhype it. I think Man of Steel, as I told you, has got me going in just hoping for the best. But, so that gives lots of room to surprise me, and I tend to like movies more than I hate them, so it'll be very interesting to see what I have to say. But I have got a segment now to talk about another one of my favorite heroes, Batman. And again, Batman is somebody I probably first discovered on Super Friends, but besides that, Batman was probably one of my, on the lower end of my Super Friends fans, because I probably liked Superman and Wonder Woman, and Aquaman was definitely one of my favorites. But when I was a kid, I really didn't know better, and Batman was kind of low down there. Although I always liked incarnations with him and Robin. I always hate the brooding fanboys that's like, you can't do a proper Robin! I'm like, no, I think you can. Then, of course, young, I became a huge fan of Batman 66. I used to see him on repeats. I remember seeing him either on City TV, sometimes showed him at noon, but they also were shown sometimes in the afternoon, and I absolutely adored this. I'd love Adam West and, oh my God, Dick Grayson's character, Burt Ward, I thought his name escaped me. Their performance and just the colorfulness of the show, and the great performances by, like, the Joker, played by Cesar Romero, Frank Gorshin's Riddler, Burgess Meredith's Penguin, and Catwoman, played by Julia Newmar, and Eartha Kitt in the show. Absolutely fantastic. I still love watching the show, and I did a whole segment on it earlier, so if you want to check that out, by all means, just go into the vault and check it out. But I love the show. It's just so fantastic, and rediscovering it now on Blu-ray, I just realized the uncut episodes just are so even more terrific. And I am actually going to start. I don't read comics as much as I did in the past. In fact, every once in a while I might pick up an Archie Digest. But I love Batman 66 so much. I'm actually I'm going to look for the graphic novels. They redid these comics a couple of years ago, and I actually want to own these and read them, and I just love all the iconic stuff. I've been so excited about the memorabilia that they've come out with, because for the longest time they had licensing issues, and in the last few years I've managed to get a whole bunch of the action figures, and I absolutely love it. I also got to mention, of course, Batgirl, Yvonne Craig, although Batgirl's never been my favorite character. I love her performance in that show. Still can watch that show. I still think it's one of the greatest shows ever made. And I'm sorry for you people who think Batman should only be dark. I like him a little bit lighter sometimes. I got into the early movie serial Batmans probably in the 80s, but I didn't think they were as good as like the George Reeves series of Superman. But I've rewatched them again, and I have a nostalgia for movie serials. I'll probably do a segment on some of the ones I've seen. But the Batman and Robin ones aren't very strong, but they're still interesting. I think it hurts that they don't have any of their iconic villains, because one thing Batman has over pretty much every other superhero is he's probably got the best rogues gallery of villains that anybody has. 1989 came along, and Batman was finally going to hit the big screen. Tim Burton was going to bring him to life, and I remember the day they casted Michael Keaton. I was a big fan of Michael Keaton from Night Shift and several other movies, Beetlejuice he had done. And he just... everybody went, it exploded that it was a what? Michael Keaton? And I remember, I wasn't so offended by it. I was a little shocked, but I wasn't offended by it, because I was still really not considered really a fanboy geek. I just was a fan. So I wasn't. I thought, well, why not? Other actors had proven comedians could prove they could do more dramatic things. I think a lot of people just got scared because they were afraid that, maybe Michael Keaton was going to bring back more of the Adam West style. So anyhow, when Batman was released, I remember I was so excited. I remember I got the Batman soundtrack, the Prince one, and I got the Danny Elfman one too, and I loved both. I thought the Danny Elfman Batman music was just phenomenal. And I still think Prince's Batman album is some of the best music he put out. And I know there's people probably questioning my musical integrity right now. But, I loved Purple Rain. I loved a lot of the stuff he brought out. But the Batman soundtrack as a whole had so many phenomenal songs on it that I was so saddened when I went to actually see the movie. And several of the songs were just kind of snippets in there. Though there were some that, like Party Man, and Trust, that got used really great. But anyhow, I remember standing in line for this one for hours. And it was back in the day when we used to do this. And, nowadays it would irritate most because we really don't have patience. But I'm saddened for the younger generations who just don't know how awesome it was to just stand in a line with your friends and just talk everything, pop culture, Batman, everything, because it was just magical. And we went and saw the movie, and I remember I loved the movie. I fell madly in love with this movie. We even, the next night, went to the drive-in to see it, and I remember just cranking the Batman soundtrack and people loving hearing it. Even other cars were listening. It was a beautiful night, and then, Batman came on, and we were all excited, and it was just awesome. And, I started buying the toys, and I loved Michael Keaton's portrayal of Batman. I think he won so many people over. And Jack Nicholson was so funny, made the Joker his own, but kept some of that Cesar Romero flair. I love that it's kind of dark, but it's also got a little bit of that camp. And I find this really interesting because a lot of people go on about how dark the Chris Nolan series is, and I agree with them. But the first Batman Begins, I don't think it's as dark as Tim Burton's Batman. I think Joker kills more people in that movie than you see killed in Batman Begins. Because Joker's letting off gas that's killing people who are greedy and stuff. They're putting on the facial stuff that's turning them into Jokers and falling apart. I love the Tim Burton series, and I love when Joel Schumacher took it over. Not everything he did with it. I love the follow-up, Batman Returns. I think Catwoman and his take on Penguin was so out there, but it worked. I'm not saying I loved the movie as much as I did Batman, but I did like Batman Returns. And Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman, like her just coming to life and making that suit, I think is some of the most memorable images. Some great one-liners in that movie. A little too many press conferences. A lot of villains in there because you got Max Schreck as well as the Penguin and Catwoman. But I still think it's a solid effort. Now, you have heard me rave about this movie before, so I'll try to keep it to a minimum. Batman Forever, even though it's a Joel Schumacher performance, and I know why people have some problems, I still think it's one of the best movies, superhero movies out there. I think they juggle so many characters. I think Val Kilmer did a very good job as Batman. I think the addition of Chris O'Donnell as Robin and Nicolette Sheridan as Chase Meridian and even, Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face, and Jim Carrey as the Riddler. I think he is just phenomenal in that part. I think the stories all work so well together. I think the world looks insanely beautiful. I still think the big top scene where Robin's family are killed at the hands of Two-Face, and Robin's off saving, the big top from the bomb, and his family basically gets shot down and killed. I think it's just one of my favorite superhero moments ever. And again, a dark, dark scene that, probably is right up there with Nolan, but I think just people think of it as such a over-the-top campy thing. I just think it's a great, great movie. I will go to my grave vowing Batman Forever is an awesome movie. Batman and Robin I did not love. I don't hate it as much as people. I think they made lots of mistakes. Number one, Alicia Silverstone as Batgirl. I'm not saying she wasn't good in the role. I just think it was way too soon. I hate that one of the main things in Batman Forever is how Val Kilmer is desperately trying to get Chris O'Donnell not to become a vigilante like him. And then in the fourth one, they're just like, oh yeah, Batgirl, come on, join the family. I still think it's odd that they make Barbara in that one Alfred's niece, and he's still like making this body. Like, I thought it was kind of erotic that he was making these outfits forget Batman, for Robin, who was supposed to be a teenage boy, and putting nipples on him and a cod piece, like, well-fitting. But when he's doing it for his niece, I think, Alfred just crossed the whole perverted scale. But yeah, it is over the top and campy, but I think people blame George Clooney a lot on it, and I just don't think George Clooney had anything to work with on there. He had an incredible jaw to fit that. So, enough of those. As I said, Batman, then people were just wanted to end that series, and Christopher Nolan came in with Batman Begins. What I love about the Chris Nolan series is he comes in with Batman Begins, which is a awesome movie. But it almost feels like an indie film. It's not huge. It's not over the top. It really didn't do great gangbusters at the box office. It only did just enough to justify a sequel compared to what the others did. I love Batman Begins and Christian Bale's performance in it. I love that we have a first origin story. I love that we have this we have an origin story finally. Because the first Batman series, nobody ever talks about, isn't really an origin. It's a Joker's origin story. Batman's already doing what he does in it, and we see what happens to him. I think we see what happens to him in almost every one of those movies, but I like that we finally get a nice origin story, and he does a great job with it. And then The Dark Knight comes out, which is a phenomenal movie. I still think it's a great movie, but not... I don't even consider it a superhero movie, because to me it's more of a noir gangster film, with Heath Ledger pulling off a wonderfully twisted Joker. But the movie doesn't even, to me, feel like a Batman movie, and he's barely in it. I think people love it so much they overlook major plot holes. I like The Dark Knight a lot. I think they did wonderful things. But as I said, I think it moved the genre into a new direction. And not necessarily in a great one, because this was probably the movie that geared, suddenly Zack Snyder in his little head was thinking, we need a DC universe like this. Because I think the game plan was hoping that Christopher Nolan's Batman was going to be what we would spin the DC universe, and I would have preferred that, considering Man of Steel. But then The Dark Knight Rises came out. A lot of people put that one down, and I don't know why. I think it was pretty good. I liked Bane with Tom Hardy. I liked Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. I admit there's no really good fight sequences in it, but I think overall it's a solid trilogy. But the first two definitely are stronger, but the third one I think is right up there. And I would have liked to see a fourth one with the hints of Batman retiring and where Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character was going to go, if he'd become Nightwing or Batman or Robin or what. But yeah, it would have been interesting to see. But I respect Nolan's decision to wrap it up. Then, I remember the announcements of Ben Affleck joining the DC Universe, and people immediately were backlashing, saying, remember what he did with Daredevil. Well, I actually liked the movie Daredevil. I think it's a strong origin story, and I thought Ben Affleck was pretty good in it. I've always liked his acting, even though I know, he went through a string there where he just kind of mailed it in. But he's proven to be such a strong director, and I think people don't give him enough credit, because I think his last couple forays in acting, like Gone Girl and The Town, have been actually pretty solid. And so when he was announced, I felt we were not going to be let down. But I think he's going to have to prove himself. And from early reviews, and I've been trying to avoid them, but from early reviews, I've heard that he's one of the positives in it. And some people have said he's actually a great Batman and could become one of cinema's best. I have... one of my things with Batman is I personally would love to see two things with the Batman series. I really hope that Batman vs. Superman really helps launch this DC universe, even though I'm not necessarily a fan of the grittiness of what this universe is going to be. I'm there for it. I like that Marvel has some humor and with their heartwarming stories. But I would love to see them say, okay, now that the Nolan series is finished, let's go back to the Tim Burton, Joel Schumacher ones and recast the Batman and then, have fun with it. And, oh my God, I would die. I was so secretly hoping that would happen. Because I thought we weren't really finished with that universe yet. And I knew it wasn't going to happen, but I can dream. My other dream is that somebody just does a fun, lighthearted version and maybe even decides to reboot Batman 66. A little humor, a little darkness, a little fun. I would love that. And with it kind of resurging again and people not as angry with it as they used to be, because a lot of people said that Batman, the Adam West performance in that show basically killed Batman. But if you were looking in the 1950s comics, Batman was already going lighthearted, with Robin and Batmite and just horrible stories. So you cannot blame the 66 Batman for keeping that alive. Anyhow, I'd love to see that. I never mentioned in the incantations of these, I'm totally not saying this word right, but Batman the movie, I mentioned it only a little bit. They did a movie version of the 66 one that starred pretty much everyone. The only difference was they had Lee Merriweather playing Catwoman because Julia Newmar had other obligations at the time. She's not the best Catwoman. I'd say she's probably, well, next to Halle Berry's portrayal, I would say she's probably a little higher than that one. But overall, I think it's it's a very fun movie and, definitely fits the series, and I think even as its own centerpiece, it's just a phenomenally fun movie. So Batman I like because they've kind of rode the rails. Hey, I would even be cool if they, make your dark cinematic DC universe. But can we just somebody do like a Super Friends? Because I would love to see that. I'm going to wrap up this set to kind of give hay to Superman and Batman. They've had a lot of great animated shows through the years, too. Batman's had a ton of great ones. But my favorite series was Justice League. It was a great show that spotlighted both Superman and Batman in a wonderful light. And if you're looking for some good binge-watching stuff, I strongly recommend Justice League. Although, they had Batman Beyond and tons of different ones. Batman the Animated Series and Superman had a couple too. But Justice League, I definitely want to give a shout out because it brings both of them to light. And with that, I'm wrapped up my second segment. So that means in the next segment, I will have now seen Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. And I'm going to call it Versus because I can't stand the V. I just think it's ridiculous. We have to shorten Versus, VS? That's crazy. Anyhow, I'm excited because after this next short break, I'll have seen it, and I will have a full review for you. Let's hope it's a good one. Fingers crossed, hands in prayer mode. I will find out after this next break. And I'm back. Not only back from the last segment, but I am actually back from seeing Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. Before I get to my review, I really didn't know what to expect from this film. I was not a fan of Man of Steel. I liked elements of it, but I thought Zack Snyder just made an absolute mess of it. It's so disjointed and horrible. And I've watched it a couple times to try to give it some things, and I've seen it, I don't know, it's gotten a little better, but still, there's so many problems in it, I just can't imagine. And then I avoided most critics' reviews and friends' reviews, but you see some, and I know this movie is being really kind of ripped apart. Some people love it, some people hate it. And so I, tried to go in with as low estimations as possible. Expectations is the word I'm looking for. And I basically have to say that I came out incredibly surprised. I didn't just like it. I absolutely loved it. And I can see why some critics probably have problems with it, or some fans. But I think that, it's horrible watching a movie where, because of a director like Zack Snyder, who is so hit and miss, visually he's top-notch. He can make a film look beautiful. But storytelling and pacing he has problems with. And it's weird watching a movie where every minute you think it's going to fall apart. When's it going to happen? And that's what I kind of felt with Batman versus Superman. But I was so happy. I remember getting about 3/4 into the movie thinking, wait, I'm enjoying this. Yes, it's a little long-winded, but I think you need that. I felt the build-up in this movie was needed, and I think it added so much that we didn't get in Man of Steel. Although, I'm going to try not to give too many spoilers, but obviously I made hit a couple. But I'm going to, avoid it, because I hate spoilers, and I don't want anyone to think that I'm going to do that. So I'm going to try to stick to things that were in trailers and stuff. But obviously this movie is an introduction to Batman, because Batman's not anywhere in Man of Steel. But I felt that not only did it introduce Ben Affleck's Batman really well and Bruce Wayne, but I felt that we actually got a little more Superman. One of the problems I had with Man of Steel was I felt there was absolutely no chemistry between Henry Cavill and Amy Adams. And in this movie, they rectify that. I see some growth. I see some actual character building. And I think Henry Cavill, he's Cavill, I might be saying his name wrong. Not only does he look good as Superman, but he's recently said some things about getting into the head of Superman, about how Superman may have this power, but Batman's been fighting all his life, and so Superman doesn't even really know how to throw punches or anything like that. And in a lot of this scenes, he's right. Batman's more military. He thinks of everything. He plots everything. Superman just follows his heart or his head and just reacts. And I love that they play that. I didn't find the pacing to be as choppy as people go on about. I actually thought, where Man of Steel, I thought he was all over the place. I thought every scene kind of led to something else. I really did enjoy the performances. Ben Affleck, I think, made a terrific Batman. Very dark. I know people rave about the Christian Bale Batman, but I never ever thought he was all that. Like, he was very good in it, don't get me wrong. But I always thought he was always second banana to whoever he was playing with. Guy wearing the suit. Where, like, Dark Knight is Heath Ledger, and, people idolize that movie, not because of Christian Bale, they idolize it because of Heath Ledger. But in this one, I felt that, Bruce Willis was a really three-dimensional character, and I look forward to getting to know more about him, because it was just phenomenal. I think Henry Cavill is, wearing the Superman outfit, like, he wears it, as in he doesn't just wear it, he wears the attitudes of it, like, he feels it. I always like when he first got cast, a lot of people said, oh, he can't be, he's British, he can't be thing, and I'm like, Superman's Kryptonian. Even American would technically be wrong to play this part if you want to get that legit. That's why sometimes I can't really listen to people who try to review movies, because there's no solidity into them. And it's all objective. You like it, you love it, you hate it, you find it's all fine. But it just sometimes I can't listen to stuff like, people like that. Anyhow, I thought the motivations of the movie were good. There's a part that I can't really get into, but the reasons for them to actual fight. We see a lot of motivation building towards Batman, but a lot of people complain that we don't really see much for Superman. And without going into exactly how he fights Batman, but a lot of people really hated that part. What I have to say is, I think the problem is a lot of people do not get Superman. I really honestly think they get Superman, but they don't. Superman is not a loved character anymore. An older generation loves him. I love him a lot more. And I thought this part was absolutely perfect. I thought they explained why he'd take on Batman pretty well. And that being said, I thought the build-up for that is all great. A lot of people have been complaining and bitching about Lex Luthor. I thought Jesse Eisenberg did a great job. He plays him very eccentric and manic. Excuse me. A little choking there. Anyhow, I thought it was well. A lot of people said it wasn't really explained. I don't need to be spoon-fed every detail in a movie. I like places where I can put my own interpretations, and I think they drop enough things in Lex's past to explain why he's a little bit manic. Not to mention, he's considered a genius, and geniuses can be a little out there and twisted and want to be in control. I thought he did a really amazing job with it. This might be a bit of a spoiler if you avoided all the trailers and stuff, but how did you avoid all the Dr. Pepper bottles and potato chip bags? But Wonder Woman makes an appearance in this movie. And I thought they actually kind of introduced her nice. She doesn't overtake the movie, but she was placed in there enough. And there is a little bit more than what you see in the trailers. There is some, you do see some Diana Prince stuff. And she's played kind of as a mystery woman. But I think it was just enough to get you interested in, I want to get to know this woman more. And I liked that they introduced her kind of with this mysterious way, even though immediately okay, this is her. But I like that they play the mystery, because now it makes me really excited about the Wonder Woman movie, and I should be excited about a Wonder Woman movie, because she's an incredible character. I grew up with the Linda Carter one, which was a little bit camp, but, I love the Wonder Woman character. And, but I wasn't feeling it. But now, after seeing this movie, I'm not only looking forward to, Suicide Squad, the DC Cinematic Universe, I'm looking forward to a Wonder Woman movie, and I think that is a great thing. As I said, a lot of people have problems with the pacing, the storytelling. It's very slow. I think you should reconsider taking very small kids. Maybe check it out yourself and then decide. I'm not saying, I think there's a lot of kids that could get through this, but it depends on the kid. If your kid's fidgety, then this is not the Batman superhero movie for them. I suggest you go see it yourself and then make that decision whether this is a movie you take them to, or if you, wait till it comes out on Blu-ray or Netflix or DVD, whatever. Because it is a long movie and there's so much to take in. And I enjoyed taking in every part of it. I look forward to seeing this again. And I will absolutely eat it up. I thought, as I said, I liked the storytelling. I liked Zack Snyder's take on it, which doesn't happen too often. I kind of worry about him taking on Justice League a little, even though he won me over, big time won me over. I can't explain enough how much I loved this movie. In fact, I think it was better than a lot of the Batman movies out there, and that's a lot for me to say, especially since some people are just ripping this movie apart. Again, I think it's a movie you need to go see yourself, make your own judgments. Don't hate it based on, all my friends. Even in the theater, I was seeing it on the third day, and people were in the theater, well, the critics hate this, and all my friends say that they thought it wasn't so bad, and, obviously they're going in with judgments. You're going in with a preconceived judgment, so, so leave it at the door. You shouldn't even be talking about it at the theater. You should just be excited for what you're going to see. But we live in a cynical time. Zack Snyder, one thing he usually always gets right is his cinematography, and once again, absolutely beautiful. After this and The Force Awakens, I'm glad that 3D is now looking good again. It looks phenomenal. And it's not overpowering the movie. When I saw The Force Awakens, I remember there were a couple of really awesome, eye-opening, wow, it's 3D. But it never took away the movie. I even forgot it was 3D. And this also happens with Batman vs. Superman. This is such a beautiful film. This has got so many artful scenes in it. Just a love affair with all the characters, the faces, the shadowing, the fight sequences are incredible. As much as you like the Nolan films, as people like the Nolan films, some of the fighting sequences were non-existent, but we actually see Batman fight in this one. And that's nice to see, It's not just a couple of hits in that. There a slight spoiler here, but some people will be upset about it. Some people didn't like the Batman used guns. I personally had no problems with it. I think Batman was a dirty fighter in this in some ways. So I think you use anything you can possibly get your hands on. And if guns are one of them, then by all means, let's use guns. But I think the battle sequences are phenomenal. Even the finale, when they all work together to fight a thing, and you may even know who it is, but I'm not going to say it. You don't need me to say it. But that battle is phenomenal. Wonder Woman does some really great moves, as does Superman and thing. And there are little hints, because it is called Dawn of Justice. There obviously is hints to other ones. And I liked how they introduced some of those other characters without them. Because at first it just seemed like it was going to be overcrowded, and they were just everybody was going to show up at the end. And I'm kind of glad it doesn't really happen that way. But they do. You get a nice sampling of some of the other heroes we got to look forward to in this series. And I thought that was quite nice. To save you time, there's nothing at the end. I don't think that's a spoiler, really. I'm just warning you. Most superhero movies, a lot of people just stay right to the end. But honestly, there's nothing there. I knew it when I was going in, but we stayed just to watch the credits and stuff like that. The score is absolutely phenomenal, too. It's wonderful sounding and stuff like that. That it just, I wanted to go home and download it immediately just because it just was so wonderful. And that's a lot to say, because the Superman original theme by John Williams and Danny Elfman's Batman themes are so iconic that the fact that they actually made, some more great music to fit this was absolutely wonderful. Yeah, what can I say? I was a real fanboy at it. I was very honored to be, I fell for it. My movie experience, I fell for it. I went and got some popcorn, and they had the big overpriced cup with the picture Batman on it, and Batman and Superman fighting on it. I don't think that's a spoiler if you're getting the cup. And I fell for it. I bought it. I know it's overly expensive, but I have a lot of these cups, and I enjoy it. And you get a topper. And I was wearing my Superman shirt that day because I knew Batman logos would be all over the place, so I needed Superman to represent a little. And basically, the guy gave me a Superman topper, and I said, "Oh, is there a choice?" And he goes, "Yeah, absolutely." And I said, "Actually, I want Wonder Woman." So, I'll probably get Superman next time. Though I wouldn't mind getting Batman too, but how many of those big overpriced cups do I need? Oh, you know what? They're fun. You can put pens in them or big drinks of water or whatever you want. I really loved Batman vs. Superman. I'm actually shocked at how much I loved this movie. Just because maybe it was the low expectations I had coming off of Man of Steel, but now I've got incredibly high expectations, which scares the hell out of me, because Justice League has a lot to live up to. But I believe we still have Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman before that hits. But honestly, I thought everything was pitch perfect. I'll be shocked if this is not amongst my top movies of the year, just because how high I was on this movie after it. And I was touched by this movie too. There were moments that seeing these icons on screen and seeing their battle, not only just the actual battle, but the build up to the battle. There were moments that I literally had just chills and like when they actually get to the battle, I was just like, oh, it's happening. It's going to happen. And it cut me to the core. I remember when the credits were running, I turned to Mike and said, "What did you think?" And he said it was just amazing. He said that he had moments where he had lumps in his throat just because, there was so much emotional investment. And it saddens me when I hear people that don't get emotional invested, or they didn't find it in this movie. And I get that. I've seen movies that other people rave about, and I'm just like, where? But that's the great thing about movies. It's non-subjective. It's you have an opinion, I have an opinion. You may have been cringing because you have seen it already, knowing that you hate it, but thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I can't convince you one way or another. I just know that I love the movie. I think this is a good thing, because if this movie was as bad as Man of Steel, in my opinion, I think I would have been lost on the DC Universe. I think Suicide Squad, I'd give it a chance, but I'm not nervous about Suicide Squad, but I think people like Suicide Squad because I've talked in the past how we live in a society now that embraces the bad sides. And because Suicide Squad is about evil and villains having to force to work to solve things in order to get, basically get out of their jail terms, or die. And I think people just embrace that no matter what. And so I think they're going to go into it like, people are already raving about the trailers. So if the same people that hate Batman versus Superman come out of those trailers just like raving about it, I'll know that, well, that's because you went in with those predetermined things. And that's how you really have to go see a movie. That's how you know what your review is real. Because if you go in with all this negativity, and trust me, I heard it in the theaters. People were going in with, oh, critics said this, critics said that, critics said this, and then at the end of the movie, people, when the credits were rolling, were giving their reviews, and I literally was hearing exactly what they were saying the critics were saying. And I'm not saying that's wrong, that's right, but I am just saying, if you don't go in with your own mindset, then you're watching a movie through the critic's eyes, knowing, oh, well, Lex Luthor is not going to be my thing or thing. So I'm glad I wasn't jaded by this film. I absolutely love it. I recommend you go see it and make your own judgment. I don't want you to say, well, Devlin loved it, so it must be good. No, go see it on your own merit and say how you liked it or didn't like it. That's what it's all about. I've had a fantastic hour talking about two of my favorite heroes, Batman and Superman. Next week, I'll be back with a brand new show, and I look forward to it, and I will talk to you very soon.